Today we're going to talk about pour over coffee. I'm pretty surprised in making videos for the past several months that I haven't already covered this topic, so it is well overdue. So first, let's talk about some of the pros of pour over coffee. Number one is portability. So you can pretty much take a Chemex, a small handheld grinder, and a kettle anywhere you go. It's not that big of an inconvenience to travel, to take it to hotels, to set up a kettle and a Chemex. Number two is that all of the equipment can be relatively affordable in terms of coffee equipment. We sell this Chemex on the Cold Blooded Caffeine website. You can get it from Amazon or really anywhere else as well. And they're going to run you between 30 and 50 bucks, somewhere in that range. So, I mean, overall it's much cheaper than, of course, commercial coffee options, but even some of your home options as well. You're going to need a scale, which again, you can get super fancy scales. This one is about 20 bucks from Amazon. And then of course a grinder, a hand grinder, again, another 50 bucks. You can go all in with a kettle and everything for under $200 and have a killer pour over setup. Another pro for pour over coffee is that every aspect of it can be controlled, from the temperature of the water going in to the amount of coffee, the grind size, the weight. Everything can be controlled, which is critically important when you're talking about optimizing and perfecting your cup of coffee. And closely tied to the controllability of pour over coffee is the optimization of the extraction. So for those of you that aren't familiar, and we're not going to get into great detail in this video because you could just spend hours talking about extraction, but extraction in the simplistic form is the amount of soluble compounds that are extracted or taken out of the coffee as the hot water is being poured through. So your optimal extraction for coffee is between 18 and 22%. And that sounds really scientific, and it is, and it can be measured, but for your home purposes, for your just general use, you're going to be able to tell the difference between an under-extracted, under 18% extraction and an over-extracted, over 22% extraction. An under-extracted coffee is going to taste sour, it's going to taste very thin and watery, and an over-extracted coffee can taste the opposite, bitter and sometimes gritty or thick. But that's not what we're here to talk about, right? I mean, yeah, that's great to know the pros and cons, but if you're watching this video, you have an interest in pour-over coffee, and you probably want to see how to make pour-over coffee. On the surface, it's actually a pretty simple process. So, like I mentioned, you're going to need a couple of key components. You're going to need some sort of pour-over equipment, right? So this is a Chemex style brewer. You can use any of the pour-over style equipments. And this is, you can get very specific into each of the different types of equipment. This is just a general overview, so we're going to use this Chemex as an example, and I'll try to be as general as I can. You can go into different brew methods for V60s, different brew methods for all the different types of pour-over equipment. This video is mostly intended just for general education and understanding. So you've got your Chemex. Again, like I mentioned, you're going to need a scale. You are going to need a filter. This is a Chemex filter. We'll talk about that in a second. And you are going to need a kettle, which I have over here getting warmed up. And of course, finally, you're going to need your coffee. Now, you're going to want to use a slightly coarser grind than what you typically do for your just batch brewers or your residential coffee makers. And I'm going to show you an example here of a regular drip grind for your residential coffee maker compared to what I would typically use for a pour-over, and in this case a Chemex grind. For this demonstration, I've decided to go with one of our newer coffees that we have here at Cold Blooded Caffeine. It's a Democratic Republic of Congo coffee, fully washed, and we use it in our KINOVA blend. So if you have not seen our video with KINOVA, we actually did a demonstration with them as well on how to make pour-over coffee. So check out that video. I'll link it here in the description. Now, I like to use a 1:15 ratio when brewing my pour-over coffees, and that is 1 part coffee to 15 parts water. You can do anywhere from 1:15 to 1:17 ratio. Play around with it, see what you like best. Anything over 1:17 and you're going to get into an under-extracted situation, which we want to avoid. So we're going to stick with 1:15. Now that means if we take, for instance, a 12-ounce standard cup of coffee, that's about 340 grams. We're going to translate everything to grams just so we're talking the same language. So 340 grams. I'm going to bump that up to 350 just to account for some water loss as it goes through the bed of coffee. So 350 grams divided by 15, which is what our ratio of coffee to water is going to give us around 23 grams of coffee. It's like 23.33 extended. But before we can start making our coffee, we need to talk about water. So we recommend heating your water just under boiling to about 205 degrees. We're not going to get into the details of water and the importance of water in this video, but just make sure that you're using filtered water or spring water to make sure that you're not adding impurities into the coffee that you're making. We're going to start by rinsing our filter paper. Now this filter paper is pretty thick, and so we don't want to impart any of the papery flavor to the coffee by just putting it in there and putting our coffee right on top of it. It also helps to heat the vessel so that you're not having any heat loss as you're pouring into a cooler vessel. Once you've rinsed your filter, you can add your coffee in on top, and then we just start pouring. You can make this your own. I've seen people do circles, I've seen figure eights. Whatever your preference is, just find something that works for you. You're going to want to avoid going up the sides of the filter because some of the water will run down the filter and miss the coffee bed entirely, and you definitely want to avoid doing that. The key to pouring with your kettle is that you want a consistent flow of water coming out without disturbing the bed of coffee and without breaking. And that's the hard part, is to try not to break the flow of water, but keep it consistent as you go through your pour. Now I like to divide my pour overs into 3 different segments. The first segment is the bloom. So we're going to pour 50 to 75 grams of water into the brewer and let that filter through and sit for 30 seconds. The reason it's called the bloom phase is that in that initial 30 seconds of brewing, some of the gases that are built up as part of the roasting process will start to release and create like a bubble on the surface of the coffee bed, which is the bloom. After that initial 30 seconds, we move into what I like to call like the primary pouring phase. And during this phase, you are going to keep a continuous pour with either your circular motion or your figure eight, whichever you prefer, for another 200 grams or so. And that's going to bring you up to about 250 to 275 grams total. At this point, I like to take a short break, let the water seep through the bed just a little bit and lower the water level, and then begin pouring again and move into the last phase, which is the final pour. So you're going to pour in another 100 grams of water to reach your target of 350 grams. Now throughout the entire brew process, I've been keeping track of the time on my scale to make sure that I'm within range of what I would expect for this coffee. Most pour-over coffees are going to brew in a range between 3 to 4 minutes. And with a Chemex, I aim for about 3 minutes and 30 seconds. And that's all there is to it. Cleanup's a breeze. You just take your filter, toss it in the trash can, and you're done. And now the best part is sitting down and relaxing and enjoying the cup of coffee that you just made. Thanks for watching this video. We hope you enjoyed. If you're interested in Cold Blooded Caffeine or any of our coffee or products, please check us out online at coldbloodedcaffeine.com. Please consider subscribing to this channel. It really helps us understand what you guys like in terms of content and what you want to see from us going forward. And we'll catch you on the next video. And this phase is called the bloom because it's actually going to release gases that are built up during the roasting process. And McKendrick's going to walk in the door right now.